Welcome back to Advanced Conversation. Professor Kent Lee. Today we're going to talk about historical misconceptions. And not many people, not many students of mine usually choose these or have chosen them in the past. But I wanted to cover them anyway for your own benefit so that you're just aware of these. And again, these are important culturally. Some of these might be things that many Westerners just believe, they heard, and they never questioned them. Maybe you've heard them and believe them without questioning. Maybe some of them have been, some of these get taught in schools. I mean, when I was young, I was taught some things in history classes that were just wrong, especially about American history. You might have picked up some wrong beliefs too. Some of these are not just Western culture beliefs, but some others. So I'll pick with the ones that maybe I've heard of or am familiar with. So first, what are some misconceptions that people have about history? What are some that you know of? What are some things that you've heard that you know are incorrect? Claims about history, misconceptions about history. What are some that you know of? Maybe you probably know some that maybe I'm not familiar with. So let me know maybe in the comments or in the LMS. So what are some misconceptions about history that you are familiar with? Things you know that are wrong, but other people believe or have heard or have been taught. Well, let me just go through a few, or dozen and a half. One, the ancient Egyptian pyramids were built by Jewish slaves. Historically, that's not true, and I'm not trying to be anti-religious or anything. This is just a historical fact. There's no historical. Egyptians kept good historical records, and you may have been told, oh, they deleted records of things that were not favorable to them, and that's not true. They did record, times when they were defeated by enemies. Especially in 1170 BC and before that, when they were overrun by a mysterious race called the Sea Peoples. That's recorded. Anyway, so there are no records of the pyramids being built by Jewish slaves or slaves in general, or of a large Jewish population in Egypt at the time. The pyramids were built by paid Egyptian laborers, poor people who were either paid or were compensated in other ways. There wasn't much slave labor involved in the pyramids. It was mostly paid or compensated labor, mostly Egyptians. 300 soldiers, Spartan soldiers, held off the Persians at the Thermopylae. Well, there were 300 Spartans, but there were, I think, about 5,000 other support soldiers there too, so it wasn't just 300. Makes for a nice movie or story, but not quite true. The Roman Emperor Nero fiddled while Rome burned. While he did blame Christians for it afterwards to use as an excuse for persecuting them, during the fire, he was apparently active in trying to help or stop it or help people. He was not a good man, of course. I'm not saying he was a good man. The man was really psycho. He was a psychopath. But he wasn't fiddling while the city burned. The story of Lady Godiva in early medieval England riding naked on a horse to protest taxes, it's not true. It's all made up. Columbus discovered America, not true. He might have been the first person from modern Europe to have discovered it, but well, it was first of all discovered by ancient peoples probably 30,000 years ago, those who first settled there. There's some controversy about exactly when and how the first people arrived in the Americas, 20 to 40,000 years ago, and whether they all came over the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska, or some also came by boats. But that's a controversy. But Of course, the Vikings were the first to actually discover America, the first Europeans, anyway, to discover America. There are controversies and claims about some other peoples who might have discovered America before the Vikings, but the Vikings discovered America, North America, long before Columbus. The only problem is that they had some short-term settlements, but no long-term settlements, and I guess they didn't stay. I'm not sure why. Maybe they didn't like the weather, I don't know. Columbus proved the world was round? No. The ancient Greeks proved that the world was round. Educated people knew since the time that the world was round. It's knowledge that was not lost during medieval times. During the time of Columbus, everybody knew the world was round. It was known, it was not disputed. He thought or claimed the world was smaller than what scientists knew it to be, and thus claimed he could get to India faster by boats. He never proved the world was round. Nonsense. Speaking of Vikings, the Vikings didn't wear those horned helmets. That was an invention later of opera singers, opera productions in the late 1800s. They never wore horned helmets. Think about it in battle. That's actually a disadvantage. People can see you more easily. If you're fighting, they can grab your helmet and pull you down to the ground. You wouldn't wear a horn helmet. They wore plain helmets. We know that. Not horned helmets. Middle Ages were not all dark. They were dark in some ways, but there was some technological improvement. The invention of the printing press by Gutenberg, for example. It's not true that they never took baths or anything. You know, they did bathe sometimes, not as often as we get to. But it wasn't all dark as presented. There was some, albeit slow, scientific progress and technical progress, and cultural progress. Not all the knowledge was lost when the Roman Empire fell and plunged Europe into the Dark Ages. Some knowledge was preserved. The economy was not exactly structured well for the sake of the poor people, but it wasn't as dark as what's often assumed. Napoleon was short. Well, his height is reported in French feet units, old French units, and it gets mistranslated, and it sounds like he's shorter than he really was. Actually, he was maybe a few centimeters shorter than me. A little short. He was shorter than me, definitely. I mean, maybe up to here or something. Shorter, a bit shorter than an average man, but not terribly short for his time. I'm 176 centimeters, by the way, so he was probably 15 centimeters shorter than me at most. Not too bad. Roman gladiator games, the emperor did thumbs up, thumbs down to spare or kill a Roman gladiator. Not true. Gladiators are prized personnel. They spent a lot of money on training them and feeding them, and many of them were kind of stars. They were sort of like the athletic stars of their time. They didn't kill the gladiators usually. That was not normal practice. It was not often that they killed them. Ben Franklin discovered electricity by flying a kite in a storm. No, that would have killed him. Actually, not Ben Franklin. He didn't actually do that. At least his kite didn't get struck by lightning, but sometime afterwards, a European person tried it with a kite in a storm and got electrocuted. Yeah, not good. They knew about electricity beforehand. It's just that Franklin made some scientific discoveries about electricity. That's all. The Wall of China is the only human-made artifact or human-made structure visible from space. Not true. Depending on how far up you are, various other structures are visible from space, including maybe large bridges and large roads and other structures. Before the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette did not say, "Let them eat cake." She's not quite as bad as she was depicted. The Old Testament or the Jewish Bible, the story of the apple in the Garden of Eden story, the Adam and Eve story, it wasn't an apple. One reason why I guess it might be an apple, aside from the fact that it was a common fruit. In Latin, the word apple happens to be similar to the word for evil, and so it's probably based on a mistranslation of the Latin or misunderstanding of Latin. And the snake wasn't actually, Jewish people did not understand the snake back then to be Satan. It was just a literary device that personified some kind of evil from some abstract evil from outside of you or from deep within you, some deep within psychological evil. It was a literary device that ancient cultures used back then to personify. They didn't think of like conflicting internal desires. They would personify it literarily with some symbol like a snake. It was a literary symbol for one's own evil desire or from external bad influences of some kind. Thomas Edison didn't exactly invent the light bulb. He improved on it. He made a great improvement upon it. He made the first commercially viable one, viable as in it could sell. Light bulbs before then didn't last very long. He made the first light bulb that could last long enough that it was worth selling. The first kind of long-lasting light bulb. Holocaust was all about the Jews. Okay, so I guess one historical myth to talk about is Holocaust denial. So some pro-Nazi people, I've met a pro-Nazi guy once, and actually I hate those people, who claimed that only a few thousand Jews died in the Holocaust. That's called Holocaust denial, and that's obviously a fallacy, often involved with some kind of a pro-Nazi conspiracy theory. Yes, we know historically 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Hitler really hated the Jews. He was into anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, for one thing. And there was just this long history of racial hatred towards Jewish people in Europe that he was able to appeal to. But the Nazis also hated other people who were sent to the death camps. So besides the 6 million Jews, probably another 4 or 6 million other people died in the death camps. Who else did they not like? Well, before the war, in Berlin, there was a very big gay district. Homosexuality, at least in Berlin, was fairly well accepted. Gays could meet in their own gay district with gay businesses and stuff without any problem. The Nazis thought gays were evil, and so they were all sent to the death camps. The Nazis didn't like gay people, so gay people went to the death camps, and so the gay district of Berlin disappeared because they were rounded up and shipped off. Also sent to the death camps, Polish intellectuals, other intellectuals, people who spoke out against the Nazis, political opponents, gypsies, or Roma is kind of the more proper academic term. Gypsies were sent to the death camps. Communists, certain religious groups like Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, they're annoying, but sending them to death camps, that's too far. They got sent to the death camps. So a number of different groups of people were also sent to the death camps. Okay, I hate to say this, but if you're ever in Europe, do visit one of these death camps, a concentration camp. And I don't say that lightly because it's the most horrible thing you can ever visit on a vacation. It is horrible, but you should do it in order to understand history. I visited one. It was a relatively small one. A number of these are maintained as museums by the German government and by other governments today as museums and as monuments to what happened. And it will tear you apart. It will make you bloody depressed. My visit to one sure depressed me for a long time. but you should see it in order to understand what humans can do to each other. Next, atheism is a new development. No, there were atheists in ancient Greece, ancient Rome. It goes back a long time. It's nothing new. Along with that, okay, some Americans think, oh, sometimes we abbreviate Christmas as Xmas, and some Americans think, oh, those people are trying to remove Christ and religion from Christmas, and it's not. It goes back to an ancient Greek. So religious texts like the Bible and such, they were written in Greek, especially at a long time ago when the paper or papyrus was really precious and expensive. They would sometimes abbreviate really important words in the text. So Christ, or Christos in Greek, the first letter was a he, or looks like an X. So they would abbreviate it by just writing X with a long mark over it. So they did this only with important words, out of respect and reverence. The Greek words for Christ, God, Israel, Judea, things like that. And then that was later combined with the English Mass. So Christmas is Christ Mass. Mass is like a Catholic worship service, or Christmas was the Christmas Day Mass or church service. So Xmas is a respectful abbreviation. Originally, it was developed by Christian monks and scribes. There's nothing anti-religious about it. Myth that Hitler was an atheist, not exactly. His exact religious views are a matter of historical debate, but he did claim to be Christian. Obviously, Christians are not going to accept him as one, I know. At the same time, some of his beliefs about Christianity were kind of odd, and historians debate that, but he did use religion in order to appeal to people, to appeal to the masses. So you can debate whether he really believed in what he was saying, but he claimed to be Christian, and he used religious language to appeal to people, although his exact beliefs would probably be considered not normal Christian beliefs. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. Beliefs that the Nazis or the Italian fascists were great administrators and Hitler created the Autobahn, the German highway system. Not true. The Autobahn existed before Hitler came to power. It was being developed by the German government before the Nazis came. So the Nazis, maybe occasionally, but generally the Nazis and Italian fascists were not very effective leaders and administrators. In fact, fortunately, Hitler was kind of a fool, and he made key military mistakes, especially toward the end of the war, thankfully, which probably saved lives because the Nazis were defeated more easily because of his military mistakes. Albert Einstein was bad at math. He was never bad at math. That's a total false rumor. He was never bad at math. Santa Claus was invented by the CocaCola company. They did use him a lot in advertising starting in the 1930s, but the Santa Claus idea is based on kind of some myths and traditions based around an old Christian saint, St. Nicholas, who liked to secretly give gifts to poor children. And in the 1800s, it got kind of merged with some Scandinavian, German, European folklore and legends, and developed into this guy in a red suit with magical powers. And an artist, an American artist in the 1800s, gave him the form that, at least by which Americans know him, the red suit and the jolly fat guy. So by the time that Coca-Cola started to use him as an advertising symbol in the early 1900s, the Santa Claus story and image was pretty much well developed, pretty much well set, especially the American version of Santa Claus. Fortune cookies are Chinese? Not really. It was sort of a little trick or gimmick that Chinese American restaurant owners developed in America. It was invented by Chinese American restaurants, but it's not traditionally Chinese. Historical myths. Let's get into more myths. There are probably some more. I mean, some things that are maybe more debated or have more mythical elements or are not credible. The Atlantis, the idea of Atlantis, there's a lost continent. It was not a continent. Plato mentioned, I think, a lost city of Atlantis, and for a long time people thought it was just a made-up story. Actually, there are scholars today probably think there's something to it, but it was the most likely theory is that there was an ancient Greek island with a city that was wiped out by a bad storm or tsunami. That's probably the basis of Plato's mentioning of the city of Atlantis that was wiped out. There are some other theories. I saw a documentary once. It was interesting, claiming that it might be an ancient city on the coast of Spain, which we don't know where it is, that was probably wiped out by a tsunami. It's another idea. There's no lost continent. We've mapped the world and the oceans. There's no lost continent there. There are no signs, leftovers of a lost continent. Shakespeare. So this is kind of a myth. There's a myth or false claim that Shakespeare never really existed, that somebody else wrote all those plays. It's an idea that scholars do not take seriously. Now, there might be debates occasionally about maybe a particular writing. And I think a few years ago, a stylistics expert claimed to have found another short, poem and linked it to Shakespeare. He claimed it was probably written by him, fits the style. But the idea that Shakespeare never really existed and someone else wrote those plays, there's no real evidence for that. It's kind of a crazy idea. It's not taken seriously. Now, there are some more legitimate controversies. And this is not the same as misconception. These are areas where historians have real disagreements. And we just don't know for sure. One is Neanderthal humans. What happened to the Neanderthals? How did they die out? We're not sure. There are different competing ideas. We're not sure. The Stonehenge formation in England, who built it? Why did they build it? What's it for? Why are there some dead people buried there? We found some dead people there a few years ago from the time it was built. I'm not exactly sure. The Christ myth theory, this one I find not convincing, but there's a maybe more, I guess, extreme atheists. I don't want to use the word extreme, but very strong atheists who claim that Jesus never really existed and there's no historical evidence. Well, granted, there are historical problems, but I think I think it's a legitimate issue. It's worth discussing. I mean, it's certainly worth discussing and debating. As I've looked at the evidence, as I've read about it, I think the evidence is that there was an actual person like that. It's just that the stories about him, how those came about, that's a separate issue. So the claim that he never existed, it's a serious question worth talking about. But at the end, I don't think that Jesus himself is a myth. The great Sphinx of Egypt, the big statue with the nose missing, who is it supposed to be? That's one of those nice mysteries. The Voynich Manuscript is a famous medieval manuscript. It's a manuscript. Nobody knows exactly where it came from or who wrote it. It's written in a very strange script, writing system nobody can decipher. It's got some strange pictures, illustrations. Seem to be, looks like plants, but they're really unusual illustrations of plants and other things. It's written in a script and nobody knows what kind of language it's supposed to be, what kind of writing system it is. There have been a number of attempts to decipher it, and some people have claimed to decipher it, and it turns out that their claims are not really valid. It's a great linguistic mystery. Who was Jack the Ripper, the famous serial killer in London in the late 1800s? And if you read the stories, it's really gruesome, actually. He was whoever did it was pretty psycho, pretty sick, the way he killed his victims. Who was he? There are a number of hypotheses about who it might have been, but we may probably never know. What exactly were Hitler's religious views? As I mentioned, it's a matter of debate. It's kind of unclear. Probably something kind of weird. Here's an interesting one. The U.S. bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Was it right for the U.S. to use atomic bombs? I don't know. I don't like nuclear weapons. I think nuclear weapons shouldn't, I think they should be done away with. I don't think it was right for the U.S. to bomb civilian targets like that. On the other hand, I kind of understand that the argument is, well, if it weren't for that, they would have just mass bombed other cities before Japan would have surrendered, and so maybe even more Japanese would have died. But I don't think that's, and there must have been like maybe some other option that military strategists could have thought of, other than mass bombing using normal conventional bombs or nuclear bombs. I don't think it's just a choice. There must have been, I don't know, there must have been some other way. I don't know, because I don't believe in killing civilians in war. Even it means, okay, killing 300,000, that's better than killing 1 million. That's still not a humane argument, I think, or not a moral one. But it's a really dark, it's a really difficult question. It's really difficult. You get into it, it's a really difficult question. So I don't know the answer. Other than my gut reaction is to say, there was so much wrong stuff there. The assassination of JFK, who really did it? Was it just one gunman? Did someone else help him? Was there a conspiracy? We'll probably, sadly, never know. Some other controversies: the origins of Native American languages. The natives in America, like the Navajo, and actually there are hundreds or thousands of them. What exactly are their origins? How did they develop? There's a lot of linguistic controversy. President Harding, he was an American president in the 1920s. He was very corrupt, almost maybe as bad as Trump, actually. He was pretty bad, pretty corrupt. He died of food poisoning, but there's some controversy over whether he was murdered, I guess. I don't know much about that. Anyway, but as crooked as he was, I don't think anyone really mourns his loss. The U.S. invasion of Iraq, there's going to be, or both Iraq wars, there's going to be a lot of controversy about that for some time. Personally, I do not think the wars were justified at all. Activities of the CIA. Was the CIA responsible for, assassinating certain, say, left-wing presidents in Latin American countries in the 20th century? Other activities of the CIA, the NSA, NSA's data collection on U.S. citizens and monitoring our emails and stuff. Something we don't know everything, and it's going to be a matter of controversy for a while. Okay, this gives you a flavor of historical controversies, debates, myths, and misconceptions. I hope you found that fun. If you want to learn more, by all means, explore some good sources on the internet. There's plenty of stuff out there. These are all fascinating topics. Okay. In the next segment, I think I'm going to talk about misconceptions about humanities and the study of humanities. Yes, hopefully something relevant to you, since most of you are humanities majors. All right, enjoy your homework, and I will talk to you later. Goodbye.